Hello students, welcome to e-learning. In this video, we will be discussing A Hunger for Books by Doris Lessing, which is the 8th lesson from your Literature Reader English. First of all, let us discuss in brief about Doris Lessing. Her original name is Doris May Taylor, born on October 22, 1919, Kermanshah, Persia, now it is known as Iran, and died on November 17, 2013, in London, England. She is a British writer whose novels and short stories are largely concerned with people involved in the social and political upheavals of the 20th century. She was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2007. The Nobel Prize is a set of annual international awards bestowed in several categories by Swedish and Norwegian institutions in recognition of academic, cultural, and scientific advances. In her early adult years, she was an active communist. In pursuit of the English, tells of her initial months in England, and Going Home describes her reaction to Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, on a return visit. Now, if we look into her journey, we get to know that she was born in Persia, but her parents moved to Rhodesia to farm maize and other crops. They were short of money, and the farm delivered little income. So she remained there until she moved to London in 1949. Okay, so she was educated in a convent school in Rhodesia. Then, at the age of 13, she left the school and self-educated from then on. She left home at the age of 15 and worked as a nursemaid, and she started reading materials that her employer gave her on politics and sociology, and began writing around this time. Okay, this is a brief detail about Doris Lessing before she started writing. Now, in 1994, she published the first volume of an autobiography, Under My Skin. A second volume, Walking in the Shade, appeared in 1997. A master of the short story, Lessing has published several collections, including The Story of a Non-Marrying Man and stories. Her African stories are collected in This Was the Old Chief's Country and The Sun Between Their Feet. Lessing was awarded the 2007 Nobel Prize in Literature. She received the prize at the age of 88 years. In awarding the prize, the Swedish Academy described her as that epicus of the female experience who, with skepticism, fire, and visionary power, has subjected a divided civilization to scrutiny. Lessing was the oldest person ever to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. In 2001, Lessing was awarded the David Cohen Prize for a lifetime's achievement in British literature. In 2008, The Times ranked her 5th on a list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. During the late 1990s, Lessing suffered a stroke. She died on 17 November 2013, aged 94, at her home in London. She was remembered with a humanist funeral service. A Hunger for Books is an excerpt from her acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2007. Lissing wrote that it is our imaginations which shape us, keep us, create us for good and for ill. It is our stories that will create us when we are torn, hurt, even destroyed. The lecture was later published in a limited edition to raise money for children made vulnerable by HIV/AIDS. In her speech, she expressed her dismay over places where basic education facilities were deprived and there are people who are longing and hunger for books. Let's look into her speech. Her speech starts like this. I am standing in a doorway looking through clouds of blowing dust to where I am told there is still uncut forest. Yesterday, I drove through miles of stumps and charred remains of fire, where in 1956 was the most wonderful forest I have ever seen. All destroyed. People have to eat. They have to get fuel for fires. So we all know the forest then has become something else now at present. And we cannot blame human. We cannot blame people because people have to eat. They have to get fuel for fires. So the visit that she made in 1956 and now is completely different. Okay, so she says here, she mentions here that this is Northwest Zimbabwe early in the 80s. Okay, so Zimbabwe early in the 80s. If we look at the history of this Zimbabwe, we will get to know that Zimbabwe, which is officially known as the Republic of Zimbabwe, formerly it was known as Rhodesia. Okay, it is a landlocked country located in the southern Africa, which was annexed by the British. Now Zimbabwe regained its independence from the United Kingdom on 17 April 1980. And Kanan Manana, a Methodist minister and a theologian, became the first president of Zimbabwe on 18 April. Okay, and in these years, in the early 1980s, we could see, okay, a massacre happened in Zimbabwe. The massacre is known as the Gukurohundi. Okay, this Gukurohundi was a series of massacres of Ndebele civilians. Okay, so the Ndebele civilians were massacred, which was carried out by the Zimbabwe National Army from 1983 to 1987. So in this process, more than 300,000 youths signed up for service in the youth brigade. So you can picturize the situation that is happening or that might have happened in such country which was newly independent, okay, newly regained its independence, and the massacre that happened in that particular nation. So she says that I am, okay, she's visiting a friend, isn't it? So it was in the early 80s that she was visiting a friend who was a teacher in a school in London, and that teacher was in Africa to help the people of Africa. The teacher is a gently idealistic soul, and what he found here in the school shook him into depression, from which it was hard to recover. Okay, what happened that made this teacher so shocked that he entered into a state of depression is, the classroom or the school consists of four large brick rooms side by side, put straight into the dust, 1, 2, 3, 4, with a half room at one end, which is the library. In these classrooms are the blackboards, but my friend keeps the chalk in his pocket, or as otherwise they would be stolen. There is no atlas, no globe in the school, no textbooks, no exercise books, no virus. In the library are no books. Okay, so that is the pathetic condition of the school. The pupils there, the students there would like to read, but there is no book. And it was also told to her that the headmaster had embezzled the school fund and is suspended. He misused the fund which was meant for the school, and he was suspended. Okay, the headmaster is suspended, but the school must go on. The teachers goes on. So the situation, the pathetic situation, I think you and I cannot fit into the shoe that she is describing. Okay, and she goes on saying that her friend does not have any money because everyone, the students and the teachers, borrowed from him when he is paid, and he knows that he will probably never get it back. The pupil there, the students, range from age 6 to 26 because some who did not get schooling earlier are here to make it up. Some students walk every morning many miles, rain or shine or across rivers. They cannot do homework because there is no electricity in the villages, and they cannot study easily by the light of a burning log. The girls have to fetch water and cook when they get home from school and before they set off for school. Okay, hardly any one of us might be doing that. Before coming to school, you finish up all your household chores and you've come to school, and after going back home again you continue with the work. I don't think we have so many students at present here who can relate to this kind of situation. Now, as Doris Lissing was sitting with her friend, people drop shyly in all. Everyone begs for books, and they say, "Please send us books when you get back to London." One man said, "They taught us to read, but we have no books." Everybody she met, everyone begged for books. Okay, so that people there were hunger for books, and it really pained her to see such situation. She was there for some days, and she could experience that the dust blew past, water was short because the pumps had broken, and the women were getting water from the river again. Okay, so dear students, we are fortunate enough to study in a school with good infrastructure, all the basic facilities available, and a good library filled with books. But do we make good use of the available resources? Okay, this is one question that I would like you to ponder on. He says another idealistic teacher from England, okay, was rather ill after seeing what this school was like. Similar condition of the previous teacher that he has explained. So here, dear students, you see we are in a fragmenting culture where our certainties of even a few decades ago are questioned, and where it is common for young men and women who have had years of education to know nothing about the world, to have read nothing, knowing only some specialty, for instance, computer. Okay, now what has happened to us is an amazing invention. Computers and the internet, the television, a revolution. How are our minds going to change with a new internet, which has seduced a whole generation into its inanities, so that even quite reasonable people will confess that once they are hooked, it is hard to cut free, and they might find the whole day has passed in blocking and bugging. Now, reading parts, I'm so sorry, reading books, not parts, reading books used to be a part of a general education. Reading makes a woman and a man full of information, of history, of all kind of knowledge. She says that not long ago, she was telephoned by a friend. Okay, she was telephoned by a friend who said she had been in Zimbabwe in a village where they had not eaten for 3 days, but they were talking about books and how to get them, about education. So people wanted to read what people in Europe wants to read, isn't it? So what he did was, she belongs to a little organization. Okay, she belongs to a little organization which started out with the intention of getting books into the village. They reported that the villages, unlike what people reported, are full of intelligent people, teachers retired, teachers on leave, children on holidays, old people. So she paid for a little survey of what people wanted to read and found the results were the same as a Swedish survey. That is, people wanted to read all of novels, all kind of novels, like from science fiction to poetry to detective fictions, plays, Shakespeare, and the do-it-yourself books, like how to open a bank account. All of Shakespeare, they knew the name. A problem with finding books for villagers is that they don't know what is available. So a school set book like The Mayor of Casterbridge becomes popular because they know it is there. Animal Farm, for obvious reason, is the most popular of all novels by George Orwell. Now, this organization, okay, their organization got books from where they could, but she tells us, okay, that a good book from England cost a month's wages, and that was before Mugabe's reign of terror. Okay, now this Mugabe's reign of terror, I would like you to know that Robert Mugabe, who came to prominence as a guerrilla leader in the 1970s, moderated his Marxist views to build a better future for the Zimbabwean or the Zimbabwe citizens. Zimbabweans had high hopes that the country had considerable natural wealth, and despite years of bitter warfare, many in the business community opted to remain, providing crucial economic stability. Zimbabwe's people were determined not to share in the fate of so many of their neighbors who had emerged from colonialism amid fanfare and high expectations. Now, after a quarter century of tyrannical and frequently bizarre misrule by Mr. Mugabe, Zimbabwe is shattered. Its inflation rate was the highest in the world. Unemployment estimates ranged up to 80%, with 7 in 10 Zimbabweans living below the poverty line. Zimbabwe had one of Africa's highest HIV/AIDS infection rates, with more than a quarter of the adult population infected. So that is what it is termed as Mugabe's reign of terror. So this group of people, they have taken the books, with all these difficulties, but having taken a box of books out to a village, and there was terrible shortage of petrol. So the box was greeted with tears. The library may be a plank under a tree on bricks in one remote village, okay? And within a week, there will be literacy classes. People who can read teaching those who cannot read, citizenship classes, and in villages, it happened. And in some villages, in one remote village, there was no novel in Tonga, so a couple of lads sat down to write novels in Tonga. It is said that people get people gets the government it deserves. But I do not think it is true of Zimbabwe. She says that it is not true of Zimbabwe because the people longs for education, longs for reading, longs for books, whereas the government is not providing or satisfying their hunger. Disrespect and hunger, it says that this respect and hunger for books did not come from Mugabe's regime, but it came from the one before it, that is the whites. It is an astonishing phenomenon that hunger for books, and it can be seen everywhere from Kenya down to the Cape of Good Hope. So here, when she talks about this hunger for books, she remembers, okay, that she was brought up in what was virtually a mud hut thatched. And there were rooms, there were reeds or grass suitable mud poles for wars. So she was brought up and in such environment with 4 rooms, one beside each other. Now the point here is, though it was a mud house, it was full of books. Okay, not only did my parents take books from England to Africa, but her mother ordered books from England for her children, that is for them. So books in great brown paper parcels were great joy for her in her younger life. So it was always with her. Reading was from her childhood. It did not occur suddenly, but it was a habit, it was a hobby, and it was within her, which was passed on by her parents. Now here, she says that she have been looking at the speeches of their recent prize winners. And he says the magnificent Pamuk. He said his father had 1,500 books. His talent did not come out of air. He was connected with a great tradition. Okay. Next, V.S. Naipul mentioned that the Indian Vedas were very close behind the memory of his family. His father encouraged him to write. John Coetzee, he was not only close to the great tradition, he was the tradition. So he says that in order to make literature, there must be a close connection with the libraries, books, the tradition. So reading book is a great tradition, my dear students. She mentions, that she has a friend in Zimbabwe, a writer, a black writer, and that is to point that he taught himself to read from the labels on jam jars, the labels on preserved fruit cans. He was brought up in an area. He has driven through an area for rural blacks. The earth is grit and gravel. There are low, sparse bushes. The huts are poor, nothing like the good cared for huts of the better off. A school, but like she has described. He found a discarded children's encyclopedia on a rubbish heap and learned from it. So there are also people who are having tough time, but they are making themselves or using the available resources and making themselves learn it. Okay, so you can imagine the height of their desperation to read, that they are not leaving even the labels on the preserved can or on the jam jars. She says that prints on jam tins and discarded encyclopedias were not uncommon, and they are talking about people hungering from standard of education they were a long way from, a hut or huts with many children, an overworked woman or mother, a fight for food and clothing. So this is not the only concern. They have many other concerns to be looked after. Yet despite all these difficulties, writers came into being. And there is another thing we should remember. This was Zimbabwe, physically conquered less than 100 years before. The grandfathers and grandmothers of these people might have been storytellers for their clan. The oral tradition, which is verbally passed from one generation to another. The transition from stories remembered and passed on to print to books. What an achievement. So remember, this country is newly formed independent, and they were annexed by the British, suppressed by the British, and they had difficult lives. And after being independent also, I have already mentioned the difficulties that they have gone through under different leaderships. Okay, so with all these difficulties, there were writers who came into being. And those writers, he believed that they might have heard stories from their great-grandfathers or grandfathers, and the oral tradition, the verbal stories were passed from one generation to another, and then it was printed to books, and it is an achievement. Now here, she is also talking about, here she was talking about books that were never written. Writers that could not make it possible because the publishers are not there. Voice unheard. It was not possible to estimate this great waste of talent, of potential. But even before that stage of books creation, which demands a publisher and advanced encouragement, there is something else lacking. Here, forget about books not written. The story is always within them, but they could not pour out as they want. And if they have poured out and written down, still they cannot find publishers. So she says that writers are often asked, how do you write? With a processor, an electric typewriter, a quill, longhand. But she says the basic question should be, have you found a space, that empty space, which is like a form of listening, of attention. Will come the words your characters, and it will speak your ideas. And in short, inspiration. Have you found the inspiration? If this writer cannot find this inspiration, then poems and stories may be stillborn. She says that when there is any new writer in London, she or he is not acclaimed for a right cause. They are labeled as either good-looking or charismatic writers. And on the other hand, the buzzing of paparazzi begins in their poor ears. They are fitted, loaded, whisked about the world. The old ones who have seen it all are sorry for this neophyte who has no idea of what is really happening. Some much publicized new writers haven't written again, or haven't written what they wanted to or meant to. And the old ones want to whisper into their innocent ears, have you still got your space, your soul, your own and necessary place, where your own voice may speak to you, you alone, where you may dream? Oh, hold on to it, don't let it go. That inspiration, don't let it go, and we need that inspiration. She says that we are a jaded lot, we are tired, we are in our world, our threatened world. We are good for irony and even cynicism, but some words and ideas we hardly use. so worn out that they become, but we may want to restore some words that they have lost their potency. Okay, with with so many, and just imagine with this new millennia, okay, the words, the vocabulary, things are changing, and we will find few words so outdated in the near future. So it has lost their potency. So she says that we might want to restore some of the words. We have a treasure house, a treasure of literature. Going back to Egyptians, the Greeks and the Romans, we all know that these are the source of treasure in terms of literature. It is all there. It is all there, this wealth of literature, to be discovered again and again by whoever is lucky enough to come on it. A treasure. Suppose it did not exist. How impoverished, how empty we would be. Okay? The treasure that is in those countries, just imagine if they did not exist, how impoverished we would be. It would be just like a skeleton without blood and flesh. We owe a legacy of languages, poems, histories, and it is not one that we will ever be exhausted. It is always there. We have a bequest of stories, tales from the old storytellers, some of whose names we know, but some not. The storytellers go back and back to a clearing in the forest where a great fire burns and the old shamans dance and sing for our heritage of stories begun in fire, magic, the spirit world, and that is where it is held today. Okay, if you have heard some folk story, you will know from where our stories or the tradition of storytelling has started. Ask any modern storyteller and they will say there is always a moment when they were touched with fire, with what we like to call inspiration. And this goes back and back to the beginning of our race, fire, ice, and great winds that shaped us and our world. The storyteller is deep inside every one of us. So every one of us are a storyteller. The story maker is always within us. Let us suppose our world is attacked by war, by the horrors that we all of us easily imagine. Let us suppose floods wash through our cities. The sea rises, but the storyteller will be there. Okay? For it is our imagination. Until and unless our imagination is deviated or removed from our life, storytelling or story making will always be within us. So it is that imagination which shape us, keep us, create us for good and for ill. It is our stories, the storyteller, that will recreate us when we are torn, hurt, even destroyed. It is the storyteller, the dream maker, the myth maker that is our phoenix. Okay, so when we are down, when we are destroyed, when we are hurt, what will make us rise again is the dream maker, the storyteller. Okay, so phoenix, that is from nowhere, from dust, we are growing again. What we are at our best when we are our most creative. So dear students, through this speech, Doris Lessing is encouraging all of us to read good books to broaden our knowledge. We will not regret making this decision in our life. In this pandemic, I urge you to read books, and very soon we will be giving you assignments to write something about the books that you have read. Be prepared for this. That's all for this video. Thank you.